our first panelist is Mr. Ronald Stein. And Ronald Stein is an internationally published columnist and energy consultant and a policy advisor for the Heartland Institute. He is the co-author of the newly released book, Clean Energy Exploitations, Helping Citizens Understand the Environmental and Humanity Abuses that Support Clean Energy. And he is also the founder of PTS Advance, one of the most successful and innovative family-owned professional service firms in California. So he's going to be talking to you today on his presentation. We've had 200 years to replace fossil fuels, the elephant in the room. So give it up for Ronald Stein, everybody.
Thank you. Today we're going to talk about the elephant in the room. Okay. Look at this way. I'm not tall enough. Yeah, the elephant in the room. We've had 200 years to replace products. I want to emphasize the word products from fossil fuels. And by eliminating fossil fuels, we're going to have a lack of products in the future that has got the society to where we're at. It's basically fossil fuels that's built the world to 8 billion, from 1 to 8 billion in less than 200 years, just during the time that we discovered fossil fuels and learned how to develop it into products for our use. And the elephant in the room is obviously the ruling class, the powerful elite, and the media refuse to talk about. The world has a product shortage, not an electricity shortage. And renewables only generate electricity. They manufacture absolutely nothing. And oil is the only known source today that can produce the oil derivatives that makes the thousands of products in our daily lives and everything in our known society. Every infrastructure is based on those products. And world leaders, they're not cognizant that renewables only generate electricity unless they have no plans for the replacement of what's now manufactured from fossil fuels, which is supporting the 8 billion on the planet. The oil exploration and refineries cannot exist just to manufacture oil derivatives. They want to get rid of fuels, gasoline and diesel, which is the primary reason the refineries even exist. That's the economic basis of building them. And they have the byproducts of derivatives that basically builds all the products in our daily lives. It also makes a lower grade fuel for ships and for planes. I did a Epoch Times TV interview. It went 35 minutes. And Epoch Times cut out pieces of it and produced a 1-minute video that went viral. And we're going to show it to you now. It's been viewed by 800,000 people and growing. Is that being handled back there?
100 years to replace fossil fuels and been unable to do it. You know, they come up, well, renewables are going to replace fossil fuels. Well, renewables only generate electricity. Wind generates electricity, sun generates electricity, wind turbines, solar panels can manufacture nothing for society. In fact, if you look back at it, all the parts of wind turbines, all the parts of solar panels, is all made with the derivatives manufactured from crude oil. The basic problem is they don't understand the definition of energy. Electricity can charge your iPhone, but it can't make your iPhone. It can make the defibrillator in the hospital work, but it can't make the defibrillator. You know, take a look in your house, take a look at your workplace, take a look at the hospital. Try and identify something that was not made with fossil fuels. That's the problem. There is no backup plan. They're so motivated to go to zero emissions, they're forgetting the one basic fact. All the 6,000 products we have in our daily lives, communications, electronics, the medical industry, on and on and on. It's all made with fossil fuels.
For the energy, you gotta think before talking to convince your listeners that you're energy literate. Air Force One, we got the president flying in a 200-ton airplane, 100% made with fossil fuel products, powered by aviation fuel manufactured from fossil fuels, and he's screaming into the microphone, we're gonna get rid of fossil fuels. Well, the only good thing about getting rid of fossil fuels, you would ground Air Force One. There is a worldwide shortage of lithium and cobalt being mined in developing countries to build the EVs. And some states have decreed that their citizens will be unable to procure internal combustion engines when there's not enough lithium to build the darn batteries. And subsidies that promote further exploitations of poor people in developing countries. When we did the book Clean Energy Exploitations, it was nominated for Pulitzer Prize by the late Jay Lehrer, because we did an interview with him and he was so impressed he nominated it for a Pulitzer Prize. But it brings transparency to the fact that all the exotic minerals and metals are coming from developing countries that have no environmental controls, no labor controls, and they're exploiting people with yellow, brown, and black skin to produce the minerals so we can feel good about driving an EV and go green. Basic energy literacy starts with the knowledge that renewable energy is only intermittent electricity generated from unreliable breezes and sunshine. And wind turbines and solar panels cannot manufacture anything for the 8 billion on this planet. That's basic energy literacy that our policymakers should have an understanding of. The energy literacy simplified, it's not climate change, it's climate challenges. Climate change is occurring like it has for 4 billion years. The petrochemical products and human ingenuity were the reasons the world populated from 1 to 8 billion in less than 200 years. And those clean renewables, like wind and solar, can only generate electricity. That's a fundamental known fact, and intermittent at best. That's the growth of the world. We grew from 1 to 8 billion, and it was human ingenuity that allowed us, every year we're finding out there are new derivatives we can make and different products we can make from it. And it's all the products that has allowed us to get to that point. That's some of the 6,000 products. That started impacting civilization. Before the 1800s, none of that existed. Where is the replacement for crude oil? You have to remember, crude oil is 100% useless unless it can be manufactured into something usable. And the indisputable facts is that renewables cannot manufacture any of the oil derivatives that are the basis of the thousands of products and the foundation of the societies and economies around the world. Before we jump out of an airplane without a tested parachute, we need to be able to support the demands of the 8 billion on this planet and the products and infrastructures that exist today and did not exist a few hundred years ago. And by the way, the parachute is made out of fossil fuels. Here's a partial list of the 6,000 products. Again, they did not exist before 1900. And life without oil is not as simple as you think. Plastics, the medical industry didn't exist before 1900. Communications, electronics, none of that existed before 1900. And, we had a zero-emission society back in the 1800s. We don't want to go there. Renewables, like wind and solar, can only generate electricity. It can charge your iPhone, it can't make your iPhone. It can make your defibrillator work, but it can't make a defibrillator. It can make your TV work, but it can't make the TV. It can charge your battery, but electricity cannot make any of the EV vehicles. And take a look, electricity cannot make the billions of vehicles. It cannot make the roadways, the asphalt, the medical equipment, filtration systems, sanitation systems, fertilizers that help feed the world, pesticides that help feed the world, fuels for the 50,000 merchant ships that are in the world today, and the 50,000 jets that are in the world today that are moving products and food around the world to keep the 8 billion people alive. And the cruise ships and militaries didn't exist before 1900. Space programs, all of it is based out of the products that come out of that useless crude oil. And without oil, there's no need for electricity. because everything that needs electricity is made with fossil fuels. In an all-electric world, like I say, there'll be nothing to power. And eliminating oil would eliminate wind turbines and solar panels. Because duh, by the way, all the parts for wind turbines and solar panels are made with the oil derivatives manufactured from crude oil. Think before talking about energy literacy. World leaders, as I mentioned, are not cognizant that the planet populated from 1 to 8 billion in less than 200 years. And it began right after the discovery of oil. And those products started coming out from our ingenuity. And the oil products, not needed for future societies, it's hard for me to believe how world leaders can believe that all the infrastructures and products that are manufactured from crude oil, such as the medical industry, electronics, communications, and the many transportation infrastructure we have, the airlines, merchant ships, automobiles, trucks, military, space program, are not needed by future societies because wind and solar can't support them. They've got to be based on fossil fuels unless we can come up with an alternative. The greatest threat to civilization is 8 billion. As we know, we've seen it in slides from different presentations, weather-related deaths are basically been eliminated, and we get rid of fossil fuels, would be the greatest threat to civilization. Life without refineries would be a life-changing shock to society, reverting back to the 1800s. As I mentioned, we had a zero-emission society in the 1800s. There were no coal-fired power plants. There were no natural gas power plants. There were no nuclear power plants. And the Beverly Hillbillies hadn't discovered oil yet. And life was hard. People very seldom lived beyond 40 years of age. When they were born, they very seldom traveled 100 miles from where they were born. And in America, in the 1900s, we had over 200 refineries. Today, there's less and less. And under Biden, Biden is complaining that these oil companies are making tons of money, inferring that these refineries are cash cows. Well, under his watch, these cash cows, 9 of them shut down in America under his watch. Makes no sense. If they're making that much money, why would they shut them down? And anyhow, it's just a lot of pressure on the fossil fuel industry. In January 2020, worldwide, there were 700 refineries. And there's the economic conclusion for the future without oils is we'll be faced with shortages and inflation in perpetuity. Because of those 700 refineries, it's projected with all the pressure, ESG, et cetera, that 20% of them are going to be shutting down. That's 140 refineries shutting down. At the same time, worldwide demand is growing. So you got increased demand and less supply, shortages, inflation in perpetuity. And the oil products, like I say, oil production is declining, refinery manufacturer capacity is declining at the wrong time when society is growing and trying to increase its demands for those products. Clean energy, again, I got to emphasize it's only intermittent electricity. You cannot run businesses, hospitals, and the military on occasional electricity. Fossil fuels are needed to feed the world. 60 to 70% of the world caloric intake is from 4 grains: wheat, rice, corn, and soybean. All of those require nitrogen fertilizers. Without adequate food supplies, 8 billion lives are threatened. And the clean energy is exploiting developing countries. As I mentioned when we did the book, the Pulitzer Prize nominated Clean Energy Exploitation, it does an excellent job of discussing the lack of transparency of the environmental degradation and humanity atrocities of people of color, people with yellow, brown, and black skin. It's amazing that we allow that to go on so we can enjoy riding an EV. President Biden even recognized that EV batteries are tainted by child labor. Back in October, he made a comment that China may be tainted by child labor, but the governments, I made a comment last night that after writing the book, I'm knowing where these exotic minerals and metals are coming from. I've made a personal decision. With the facts I've got, I won't buy an EV for ethical reasons, because I know where the exotic minerals and metals are coming from, and I'm not willing to financially support that. But the government, they're willing to subsidize it. They want to subsidize you to buy EVs, subsidize wind turbines and solar panels, which require all these exotic minerals and metals. So the government is subsidizing this further exploitation of people in poor countries and environmental degradation in their countries. And so I think it's immoral, unethical, but hey, that's my personal decision. I won't buy an EV. Shifting to EVs will automatically increase our dependency on minerals and oils. China's controlling most of it now. Right now, there's like 1.4 billion vehicles in the entire world. And I think a year ago, we had like 12 million EVs, which is less than 1%. So there's 99% of the vehicles in the world that are not yet EVs. And there's not enough lithium and cobalt in the world to build that many batteries. Refineries, like I say, they only exist economically to manufacture, gasoline and diesel, and they make the derivatives, which are becoming a major part of society and the major part of the reason we got 8 billion people living today. Like I say, they cannot exist just to manufacture low-grade fuels and the derivatives, because some of the people that want to go green says, we just want to get rid of gasoline and diesel, but we want to keep living the way we're living. That ain't going to happen. And that's why refineries are shutting down. And what's the profile of an EV owner? Highly educated, normally 1 or 2 degrees, financially well off, about 150,000 or more. They represent multi-car families. The limited usage of EVs in California, which has about half the EVs in the country, is about 5,000 miles per year. It's a second car, it's a toy. They drive it as much as they drive the Lamborghinis. And, most families are not well educated, not financially well off, and not multi-car families. As I mentioned before, everything that needs electricity is made with oil. The proverb, you can't have your cake and eat it too, tells us that you can't rid the world of fossil fuels and continue to enjoy the products and fuels manufactured from fossil fuels. I think the automobile industry is being mandated into a death spiral. You have a situation, you got an extreme limited supply of the exotic minerals and metals. There's not enough lithium in the world to build that many batteries. Lack of sufficient numbers of buyers. Right now it's the 1%ers that are buying the EVs, but most people aren't in that category. And then you have the concern about renewable electricity. It's not on the grid. In fact, in California, we had a heat spell about a month or so ago, and the first thing Governor Newsom said, don't charge your EV. The governors, like I say, they've got a lack of ethical, moral, and social responsibilities. They're encouraging the exploitation of people in these developing countries that are mining for these exotic minerals to support the green movement in the wealthy countries. Where's the climate movement heading? Product shortages and inflation in perpetuity. That may be the future. If they get their way, and they're getting their way, with these refineries shutting down, there'll be no derivatives to make the products. And you're seeing that now. It was part of COVID, but construction is being held up. Parts, windows, everything, doors. Everything's made with fossil fuels. Elimination of fossil fuels, it's a sure path to human extinction. And I think Alex will talk more about this. Life support for the 8 billion is based on the products and fuels. Reverting back to the 1800s, zero-emission society, we may get there, but we're going to lose a couple billion people getting there. And today, the world's population, we're dependent on the numerous infrastructures that did not exist before 1900. Long-range plans to generate electricity, but no plans to replace crude oil that's supporting the world. And, you've heard the statement from Greta Thunberg, how dare you? I took it a different way. He said, how dare the ruling class, the powerful elite, the media promote the elimination of fossil fuels by supporting jumping out of the plane without a parachute before having a plan to replace what is manufactured from fossil fuels. Renewable takeaways, to enhance your energy literacy, renewable energy, again, it's only generating electricity. Wind turbines cannot manufacture anything. Subsidies are financial incentives to continue the exploitation of developing countries, of their people. And wind turbines and solar panels themselves are made with oil derivatives. And the fossil fuel takeaways, everything that needs electricity is made with fossil fuels. Crude oil is useless unless it can be manufactured into something usable, which we're doing. And before we rid the world of crude oil, where is the replacement before we change everybody's lifestyle? And the number of manufacturing refineries are decreasing, demands are increasing, and that's going to be shortages. Maximize, if I were in charge, I would maximize the health and well-being of the 8 billion on this planet, which is growing. And focus on energy literacy. I'd love to have people talk about energy at the dinner table, and it's got to be in layman's terms. It can be pretty technical, but address the elephant in the room that the ruling class and the powerful elite and the media refuse to talk about. It's the lack of products in the future. That's going to be the result of ridding our world of fossil fuels. And again, before we do it, we must understand we populated from one date in 200 years, and before we jump out of that airplane, let's have a backup plan. Summary takeaways to enhance your energy literacy. Nonsense that functional civil societies can live without products from coal, oil, and gas. Today's life without fossil fuels is symptomatic of the uneducated world leaders who haven't the faintest idea about what makes their safe and utterly privileged life possible. The elephant in the room, as I mentioned at the very beginning, like I say, we're talking about products manufactured from fossil fuels that help build the world 8 billion. It's the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about, and we got to have a plan to replace it before we jump out of that plane. Again, how dare you? Like I say, it's the media that I'm just appalled that they would promote subsidizing what's happening in developing countries to continue. You've heard of blood diamonds? These are blood minerals, and we're supporting it. That's my contact information. I thank you very much, and contact me, and I'll add you to my distribution list or send you a copy of that video. Thank you much.